Cambridge Technical Unit 2 Learning Outcome 4. Here is a starter exercise for the beginning of the lesson. It's about best practice at a lunch club for older adults. Consider this scenario. Staff provide the same meal for all of the older adults attending the lunch club. They think it's important so that everyone is treated the same. The staff make sure the food is soft or cut into small pieces. This is because older people struggle to chew because of wearing dentures and they suffer from arthritis, making it difficult for them to cut up their food. I want you to think about whether this is best practice. Write down some notes, justify your answers, and your teacher will check what you have put. Here are some key terms for this learning outcome. First of all, there is non-judgmental, which is respecting a person's feelings, experiences and values, even though they may be different from yours. What you've got to realise, if you work in health and social care, there are people that are going to have varying or different opinions from yourself, and you are not to be judgmental on that fact. Not judging or criticising someone because of your own attitudes or beliefs is important. We next have professional development. This is the process of improving and increasing the skills and capabilities of staff. This can be done through courses, staff training. Next is monitoring. This is about measuring and checking the progress or quality of something over time. Methods of monitoring can involve observations. You may have noticed that teachers have observations from other members of staff occasionally. Inspections, when you are in a school or a college, Ofsted may come in and inspect that provision. Analysis of surveys given to service users. Your teacher may have given you a survey to fill in to check and monitor your progress. Next, we have performance management. This is an ongoing process between, it can be between teachers and their line manager, or a care worker and a supervisor, involving meetings and observations over time to provide feedback on performance. So it's somebody looking at your performance, telling you how you're doing and identifying targets for improvement for your future. How do we apply the best practice in health and social care or childcare environments? Well, it's very, very important to follow the values of care in health and social care and childcare environments. This in turn will be able to provide high quality and personalised, safe and compassionate care that will promote equality and diversity and ensure that the rights of individual care is met in health and social care environments. So it's really important that this is also consistent across the board to make sure that all members of staff within that care environment are providing the same care values. So what does best practice mean? Here are some key aspects of best practice. So to be the best at your job, especially in care or childcare or social care, it's really important that you are not judgmental of others. You need to respect the views and choices that others around you make. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses could refuse a blood transfusion. Now that is their choice and their decision, and you need to, as a healthcare worker, respect those views, even though you may not agree with them. You need to ensure that you have anti-discriminatory practice, not discriminating against people on the grounds of their age, race, sex, gender, sexuality, etc. You need to value diversity, understand that there are differences. You need to use effective communication. There's no use mumbling or not adapting your communication to meet a service user's needs. You need to follow agreed ways of working. There will be policies and procedures in place that you will be expected to follow. Another key aspect of good practice includes ensuring that you attend training and you have professional development opportunities for staff. Mentoring, monitoring and performance management for staff can help them set targets for the future. And by attending staff meetings, issues can be discussed, brought up, and group ways to tackle it can be established. I think I need to quickly apologise for this slide here. At the top it should say a setting or a care professional responsibility is to ensure understanding and awareness on how to promote the best practice. So this is about applying the best practice and the ways in which it can be achieved. So it can be achieved by producing a skills audit, figuring out strengths and weaknesses, reflecting on their own practice, what they do well, what they can improve on. There should be sessions where they can discuss what went well and improved on. They should be able to set targets. Inexperienced staff could have a mentor or coach. When teachers are new to the profession, they are called newly qualified teachers, NQTs, and they're all given a mentor to help them through their first year, give them advice and support. As they are a more experienced member of staff, that would be able to support them through the whole of their first year. There should be provision of training, especially on areas that need extra training and support, and there should be adequate resources in place. For the next part of this PowerPoint, if you could cut and paste the above hyperlink into your browser, then if you watch the clip, split into small groups. Now, if you are at home and it's lockdown, this is going to be quite difficult to do. So you're going to have to actually write some notes down by yourself to apply the best practice you have seen the practitioners used in this video. It might be worth then perhaps doing a Teams or a Zoom meeting or a WhatsApp call with one of your friends in the class to discuss and reflect on identifying key aspects of good practice within that clip. When we work in healthcare, social care or childcare, we need to make sure that we are aware of the impacts of discriminatory practice. So if someone is being stereotyped or labelled or treated differently because of their skin colour or their age or their sexuality, it's very, very important to understand the impact that it will have on that individual, how detrimental it will be to them if they are being treated differently because of these reasons. Every health, social care or childcare professional should be able to identify discrimination. You need to know when someone in your care, a service user, is being discriminated against, and then you should be able to respond with the appropriate action if you see it occurring, such as reporting it to your line manager, making sure that that perhaps you speak to the person, if you are the line manager, you speak to that person about the behaviour, that it's recorded down for future reference. It is so important that you do not ignore discrimination or discriminatory practice. So just going on from the previous slide a bit more, what do you do if you see someone that's being treating a service user in a discriminatory way, or a child? It's about choosing the appropriate actions and responses to use. So it may involve you reporting, as I said previously, the incident to relevant authorities, such as if it was in a hospital or a care home or a doctor's surgery, it could be the CQC. If it was in a childcare environment, it could be Ofsted. Or you could report to management. You can also reflect on your own attitudes to make sure you also aren't promoting this form of inequality. It's about changing your practice and then also encouraging others to take part in the same process. It's important that any action you take is appropriate and all the internal steps have taken. So you have reported to your line manager, you've made a complaint. If then it's not taken seriously, you can report it to the authorities, but you should report it internally within the setting first before you take it further. Many issues can be resolved by simple changes in the environment. However, where more drastic action or more dramatic discriminatory practices occurring, it could be reported to the CQC or Ofsted. Now I'm going to discuss some examples of discriminatory practice. At this point, you might want to stop the PowerPoint to copy down some of the examples so you're fully aware of what's involved. For example, we have got discriminatory practice, an example of prejudice, which is avoiding people that are perceived as different. Inadequate care could be a childminder who can't be bothered to entertain the children, just plonks them in front of the TV all day just to hope that they sit there quietly. There's abuse and neglect, and this could be verbal abuse where they're making nasty comments to a particular service user or a child. It could be neglect where a childminder is not changing a baby's nappy or not feeding them. And these are really, really important that these are tackled very early on. Another example of discriminatory practice is a breach of health and safety. A care home not having any trained first aiders is an example of that. Staff not trained in manual handling. So manual handling is where you're taught to lift and carry appropriately. They're not trained in that. That could cause injuries to the back, the shoulder, the neck. If equipment is not regularly checked for damage, that's vital, especially as a childminder where you have children and young children that tend to put things in their mouth. You need to make sure that your surroundings are safe. Inadequate hygiene practices, so that's very, very important that happens. People are washing their hands thoroughly, using soap, using gloves if they're required. Activities not being risk assessed. Even in a school, if you take students to the local park, you are expected to risk assess it so that you consider all the risks and hazards that could occur whilst out on your visit. Again, another mistake I've noticed. Here are some further examples of appropriate actions and responses to ensuring equality, diversity and rights. If possible, try to challenge the person at the time, explaining to the person how they're discriminating, raising awareness, and then monitor that staff member. Challenging afterwards through procedures, telling the person to read the organisation's policies will be a good way to show them what they're doing wrong and what is expected of your establishment or your setting. Senior staff could also be consulted, and you could go to them for advice on how you should actually address this issue and deal with it. Then you could challenge them afterwards through long-term campaigns. So you could provide staff training on anti-discriminatory practice. It could be targeted to a small group of staff or whole staff to try and improve the lack of to try to improve and prevent anti-discriminatory practice to prevent discriminatory practice from occurring. I'm now going to discuss whistleblowing. So this involves raising concerns with a more senior member of staff, such as a supervisor or manager. In an environment with an open culture where concerns can be raised without fear or repercussions, so you feel confident to speak to your line manager about issues such as victimisation, bullying, or you witness abuse, if you feel that you can go to your line managers and discuss it, that's brilliant, which means they're more likely to be acted upon and dealt with. However, where you are in a situation where severe discrimination, bullying, victimisation, abuse is occurring, and nothing is being done by the management, you may need to whistleblow to outside authorities such as Ofsted or the CQC. In relation to whistleblowing, very quickly, every company should have a policy on whistleblowing. It's where the worker is allowed to, so if they're not being listened to by management as serious issues, nothing's being done, they are allowed to tell the higher authority, such as the CQC, about what is occurring in that setting without repercussions, so without losing their job or their job being at risk. However, unfortunately, once people do whistleblow, it no longer becomes possible for them to stay in that job because they often upset people and people are angry with their actions. But the whistleblowing policy is in place to protect people if they are trying to highlight particularly bad practice. So this slide here is providing information about complaints procedures and advocacy services. So this enables a professional or a service user to take action about poor treatment. The organisation's complaint procedure should be provided so that the individual knows how to complain and whether to make an internal complaint or whether it involves an outside agency like the CQC. So whether they need to complain to the people inside that setting or if it's much more serious. Some people are unable to speak up for themselves. They may have a speech impediment, they may not be able to speak, they may have learning difficulties or dementia, and therefore an advocate, who's someone who could speak on your behalf, can make sure that their voice is heard, to ensure that their rights are obtained, and have their care needs met. So it's very, very important, if you make a complaint, if you are unable to do it verbally yourself, that someone could do it on your behalf. Dealing with conflict. At some point in every one of our lives, we will have to deal with conflict, whether we work in a Saturday job at Primark, where we have a customer coming up to us being rude or shouting at us, or whether we are in a care setting where you have a patient that's highly agitated and is having a go at you for the waiting times, or that they're not being treated properly. You will have to learn how to deal with conflict. So the most important thing is to stay calm. If you start getting agitated and shouting back, that's going to make the situation worse. So you have to provide active listening. So you need to make sure that you are showing that you're listening, so nodding your head, perhaps repeating back what they've said to you, making comments, yeah, and also remaining calm at all points, even when you are being shouted at. Trying to empathize with them and trying to understand why they are upset will help you deal with the situation too. It's important to be able to see both sides of the conflict. So once they've explained to you their side of the story, it's very important that you listen to it so you can understand why they're getting upset, in order that you can in turn explain your side. Whatever you do, at any point, do not raise your voice, do not shout. If you fear that you are going to be hurt at any point, or that perhaps if it's getting out of hand, you need to make sure that you know where you can get help. Where possible, try to remove the person that's very angry from that situation, take them away, perhaps into a quiet room, but always make sure that you are between them and a door. So should it get particularly aggressive, you are able to make that exit. But again, also make sure you know where the support is or security is, should you require it. So here we have a pairs task. If you are in lockdown and listening to this, it may be a little bit more difficult unless you're prepared to WhatsApp a friend or someone that you know in the class. So you are going to work in pairs or alone and investigate what you could do to promote equality, diversity and rights if you personally were setting up a nursery or a residential care home. You could look at, for example, policies, procedures, training, staff recruitment, consider the activities that are provided in that environment. You could think about the actual environment itself, whether there be any displays, what sorts of displays could there be, what type of food, facilities that you would have. And then you could write those notes down, and you could either send them to your teacher or your assessor, or share them with a friend in the class. So, quick quiz. You are going to pause the PowerPoint and you are going to see how much you remember. I want you firstly to list 4 different kinds of discriminatory practice. Then I want you to explain potential effects of inadequate care on an individual. Think about how someone could feel, or what's the impact of inadequate care on a person. I want you to produce a mind map showing different ways health and social care and childcare can promote equality, diversity and rights. And then I want you to research what is meant by agreed ways of working. And how could a care setting ensure that a member of staff correctly follows the moving and handling procedure? So that is your task. You may use Google if your teacher allows you to. You can look at the previous PowerPoints, learning outcome 1, 2, 3 and 4, your class notes to assist you. Depending on your teacher or assessor, they may ask you to send the work, or you may just make notes for future use.